Happy Friday, folks. It is also the debut week of the NFL season, and actually the season itself began last night. And I have to say, and people who've watched this Buzzcast for a few years knows that I've become increasingly more disenchanted with the NFL as the years have gone. I have to say that last night's game, which was supposed to be like a showcase event between the Super Bowl champion Eagles and Atlanta, for 3.5 quarters was one of the most dreadful games I have ever watched. It was preseason like in terms of, the teams being sort of just not in sync. And yeah. Russ, it's something we talked about this morning. You've got these teams, especially in the NFL, and we're going to talk about, rookie tournaments in the preseason in the NHL later in the show. But this, I think, is a product of all these teams holding out all their best players and playing them very little during the preseason. And what you get is sloppy, bad, penalty-ridden, crappy football.
You do. And what's interesting is, like, for the first couple of weeks of the NFL season, you might as well just make it a regional sport. Like, because you're only going to care about that game if your team's playing. I watched, and I fell asleep like twice. Like, it was that bad. I mean, Matt Ryan was awful. You can say the defenses are great, and I won't disagree, but the problem is when both quarterbacks look bad, and a lot of other, there were some other players that look good, but when both quarterbacks look bad and really nothing changed in that game from the year before, it was the same exact game with almost the same exact way that it ended, that tells you that they haven't progressed at all based on this year's camp. And that is a big issue.
Yeah, it was just. I mean, yes, the slag against the Falcons is that they weren't able to score in the red zone, and I'm
going to tell you one thing, okay? Yeah. When you're coming down to the red zone, and I get it, it's not an easy thing, right? The Eagles do have 7 guys that don't rush, and they have a great rush, and there's a lot of good things that go on their side of the ball, but the first time trying to do a sweep was just stupid. Like, when you go 4th and 1, that was just dumb. It's not 1970. Don't do a sweep.
Right.
Sweeps take too long. They had 7 guys coming in. Unless your guy's so fast and you're blocking so good, which clearly Atlanta's isn't, that's a missed call. But the other thing is, when you get down very low like that, where's the deception and trickery? Like, Matt Ryan didn't do any of that. Like, every time you knew he was throwing the ball to Julio Jones, like every time. Yeah. And he didn't even do like a, play action. He didn't do anything like that. That's a little scary to me. I got to put my dog out.
Yep. And frankly, it's, I mean, honestly, and right now it's September baseball. In most of the pennant races are over with. There might be something going on in the NL in terms of wild card and the Central. But most of the playoff races are over with. And the only reason I wasn't watching a Yankees game is because the Yankees weren't on. And that would have been a meaningless game in Seattle if it was on. And I would have rather watched that. There was more drama in that than Philadelphia, Atlanta. It was just horrible. And I've gotten to the point now where I'll watch the Bills games, but it's going to be watching losing football this year. But I really get the impression that football now is purely a vehicle for fantasy sports, and
it really is.
And honestly, I used to be a big fantasy football player. I stopped 4 or 5 years ago because I just can't concentrate on meaningless, getting points for like 5 yards a carry and subtractions for fumbles. It's just too ridiculous. And I don't have the time in my life to waste on it. And I think that's what it all is now. It's all fantasy football and betting.
See, like, we know that hockey is a niche regional sport, and we're okay with that. I think one day the NFL is going to have to come to grips that they've turned that game into that too, because I saw so many people online when it wasn't their team, they were like, this is a horrible game.
Yeah.
And even like Eagles fans would tell you, hey, it's a horrible game, but we won. And that's good. I agree. If it's my team and they won, I don't really care how they won. But the idea now that you would just watch any game from the NFL, I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, and switching to another subject before we start the show, I have to say, because he was one of my favorite actors growing up, Burt Reynolds. passed away at the age of 82 yesterday. And the thing is, it's like, okay, he was not like a Peter O'Toole or Richard Burton in terms of being like, he was nominated for an Oscar for Boogie Nights. And I found out yesterday as the, observances of his passing were talked about, is that he hated that movie. He never watched it. He took the role, but he disagreed with the director, didn't like the movie, and was nominated for it. And I remember rooting for him to win the Oscar, sort of as a career achievement, like they sometimes like to do. And he didn't seem upset when he lost it. I think he didn't want to win for something that he didn't particularly like.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is something to that. Sorry, I didn't know if do you have more?
No, I just wanted to say that, my favorite movies. I mean, everybody loves Smokey and the Bandit, and most people think.
I've never watched it again, though, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's a little. It's really
good. And you want me to be really honest? I like Jackie Gleason, man. I'm always a Jackie Gleason fan. Yeah. So Jackie Gleason to me was the best thing in that movie.
Oh, he was great. He was great. And
there's memes, by the way. Think about this. How many years ago was that movie?
76, 77.
There are memes of Jackie Gleason as Buford T. Pusser from that movie.
Buford T. Justice. I heard somebody because Buford T. Pusser is walking tall. I was
I got him mixed up.
You're not the first person who did that yesterday.
But you know what I mean? There's memes for this all these years later for that movie, and it tells you how
I'm in hot pursuit.
Yeah. I mean, but look, there's plenty. Cannonball Run. Those are all good one-off kind of movies for me that I enjoyed and I liked. But the one that I always watched over and over was Longest Yard. And that's why when Adam Sandler tried to put one out a couple of years ago, I wouldn't watch it because Burt Reynolds was perfect in that part. He was a college football player. You could tell this was like the right part for him.
Yeah, and then they basically, I think, begrudgingly gave him the Nate Scarborough part in the Sandler movie. My favorite two movies are sort of not obscure, but I think like while he was still big, he was able to make movies that he wanted to make, and one of them was called Hooper, where he was a stunt guy, and a stunt guy who was. It was a great movie. Terry Bradshaw had a little role in that movie. Yeah. Robert Klein. It was a really, really good movie. And one of my favorites, and this was like when he was trying to do more dramas and more serious stuff, was a movie called Sharky's Machine.
I was going to bring that up. Sharky's Machine was very good. Someone brought that up on my timeline. I enjoyed it. Of course, look, we don't have a banjo to play. Deliverance was something else. I don't know if Deliverance still works today. But it's a really good, creepy.
It's disturbing. I watched it,
but it is worth watching. It is
sure. I watched that once, and that was it. And the funny thing was, I remember, and he was interviewed. And if anybody wants to see a good interview, the old show that was on, I think it was Bravo or the E Channel called Dinner for Five. It was Jon Favreau getting a bunch of people together and just having dinner and talking stories. There's a YouTube of a Dinner for Five with Burt Reynolds, with Richard Lewis, Kevin James, and Tony Shalhoub, and he's telling stories about different things in his career, and they mentioned Deliverance briefly, and what I heard was he was basically slated to get an Academy Award nomination for Deliverance. It was a really serious movie, and the GQ thing with him basically naked, the posing came out, and that buried his chances of winning an Academy Award.
Because he was really good in Deliverance. And like I said, it's not a kid's movie. It's not even a movie you want to watch late at night. It is disturbing. But it's a good movie, and it's worth watching. And we'll miss Burt Reynolds. Look, Evening Shade was even good, right? Like, it was good for what it was.
And when he was on The Tonight Show. And
he was always a good guest.
Always a good guest. So it's sad. I mean, it was like I said, he was one of my favorites.
The highest paid, actor of his time for a long time.
And I had heard some stories about like his, financial situation, like recently up until yesterday was not good. Like he had property that he had to sell off and things of that nature. So, look, at the
end of the day, like you want to talk about like two highly paid actors, Burt Reynolds versus Tom Cruise. I would take Burt Reynolds over Tom Cruise.
Yeah, and the strange thing is that Burt Reynolds, how the studio system, things fell through the cracks. Two actors were fired on the same day. I think it was from Warner Brothers. Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. And they met in the parking lot. And I didn't know this. And they had a conversation. And apparently Burt Reynolds was told he's not that good of an actor. And Burt Reynolds told Clint Eastwood, I guess I'm going to go take acting lessons. That was smart.
Well, yeah. And he told the story. Apparently the guy who told them that they couldn't act and that fired him, they found out that he had passed away years later. And Burt and Clint went to the gravesite with a 12-pack of beer and relieved themselves on his grave. So, rest in peace, Burt. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, September 7th, 2018.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Starting next week, we are going to start doing team previews. I'm trying to organize it with Ack, but I think we're going to just do it in alphabetical order. So that would mean Monday we'll do the Arizona Coyotes and Anaheim Ducks. Stay tuned for that. I know Ack is going to write some blogs on it, but wanted to start with a story. Emily Kaplan from ESPN, who I believe is at the NHL media gathering in Chicago, had asked some players regarding the comments of, and making a connection here between football and hockey, the ridiculous asinine comments of Jalen Ramsey, the cornerback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, who apparently is trying to make a name for himself for being a jerk. I mean, he went around and basically critiqued every NFL quarterback positively or negatively, said some things about Rob Gronkowski, and then he went to the world of hockey and basically said, you know, with 6 months I could learn how to skate and could make the NHL. And, you know, a number of players, then I'll read up a couple comments here. Jack Eichel, I think it's insulting to our league. For us as players, we've dedicated our lives to playing in the NHL. To think after 6 months you could come play arguably one of the hardest sports in the world. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. He would say that. It's ignorant. Vladimir Tarasenko, I can't bet any money in the world, and there's no chance he can play in the NHL in 6 months. It's impossible. Him saying that, it declasses our sport.
Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, it really, just a couple more. Dylan Larkin, he said he's never skated before, ? So there's no chance. When informed of Ramsey's lack of experience on skates, John Tavares of the Toronto Maple Leafs said simply, well, I'll tell him good luck then. I mean, it's just, I mean, honestly, if it's...
Tavares is really, like, that shows you the class of Tavares, because he could have just dug in there. Because, you know, here's the reality. The reality is there's probably one or two guys in the NHL that could do something on the football field, whether that's be a gunner, whether that is be an offensive lineman or something else. But to be able to learn how to skate like that, no. I mean, that takes you a long, long time. You're not just – nobody is a natural on skates.
Yeah. And it's not just skating.
No.
I mean, I know people who skate, but then you put them put them in a hockey game, and it's balance in terms of being hit and hitting. It's being able to shoot, being able to pass the puck well. I mean, it's not just skating. Maybe you can learn the basics of skating, but to skate at an NHL level, it's patently absurd. And that's why I took a little bit of offense to it, because
I took offense too. I mean, it's like you said, it's skating and the stick handling. And Gordie Howe said he felt it was even more. And Gordie Howe played baseball too. And a baseball is the hardest thing to do, like to hit a baseball. It is the hardest thing to do. But as far as an overall sport for hockey, he felt like hockey was the hardest because for the time you're out there, even though some people say, well, it's only a minute and a half, 2 minutes, but it's continuous motion. And no matter what, nobody is sitting back, you know, like on basketball. I used to love as a guard, I could just, you know, slough off on defense and sort of catch my breath. There's no catch your breath moment in hockey.
No. And that's why two sport athletes to me are amazing. I mean, you know, Bo Jackson, obviously, even Deion Sanders. I know he wasn't that great of a baseball player, but he was in the major leagues and he was in a World Series. So you have to tip your cap to him on that. I wasn't Dave DeBusschere back in the day. It wasn't baseball and basketball. I mean, that's really tough to have the skill set to be able to play two sports.
Yes. I mean, Ron Reed. Ron Reed, the relief pitcher, was basketball and baseball. Like, there are some guys that, you know, can do it. And
Charlie Ward, basketball and football.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, if Jalen Ramsey's purpose is to make a name for himself and to be known as the biggest jackass in the NFL, he has accomplished that goal. Thank you.
Well, he won't get a lot of free hockey tickets now if he asks for them.
No, I don't. Yeah, if there was a team in Jacksonville, I think somebody would invite him on the ice for a fight. Okay, some notes here, some contractual notes. We've been talking about, players who are going to be unrestricted free agents in next summer in 2019, and how some of them may sign deals, how some of them, may follow the Tavares model. And there was actually an interesting article, I think it was Craig Custance of The Athletic, talking about players using the Tavares model in terms of now going to free agency. I don't think this is going to apply to everybody, but he interviewed Tyler Seguin, and he interviewed a couple other players, and they said, okay, there's now sort of a blueprint to follow now in terms of, okay, if you want to sign with that team that you're with, that's fine. You can get that done. But now you can follow the Tavares model and just say, okay, I don't want to be traded. I'm going to go and meet with a bunch of teams. And then if I want to go back to that team, I can, but I have the freedom to not be locked into the team that you were with and to go someplace else if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing is having the freedom. I think that's the key statement, isn't it? I mean, that's a lot of hockey players now are looking for that.
Yeah, and I think we sort of bemoaned the fact that the NHL really didn't, it didn't seem like, I mean, we had Brad Richards, we had Suter and Parise, but there were no really big players, saying, I'm going to go someplace else. Stamkos had the opportunity. He decided he wanted to stay in Tampa. I understand why, because Tampa is a very competitive team. The tax situation, all those things were factors. Tavares needed the impetus of a cluster F in Long Island to really help him to go. But, now if Seguin, and apparently there are talks between Seguin and the Stars right now, and if they pony up what he thinks he's worth, then I'm sure he'll stay. But he does have the option here to go someplace else if they don't give him the money that he thinks he deserves. So,
yeah, I mean, there'll be an outcry from their fan base if they don't sign him, right? But it's not the same as back in the day the Cowboys didn't re-sign Tony Romo. It's not the same as that.
Right.
And so honestly, that alleviates some of the pressure on the Stars to overpay for Tyler Seguin, if you think about it, because they're in a brand new situation with Jim Montgomery. We don't know how Tyler Seguin will play for Jim Montgomery. We assume he'll be fine because he's Tyler Seguin and he's really good, but we don't know. So this is uncharted territory for this. So what if he doesn't play that well for that? I mean, then the offer might not be what Seguin wants it to be. And, at the end of the day, I think Seguin does like the area, but, he's a guy that probably does want to get paid. And I don't know if these negotiations are really going to be fruitful. And I think at some point it wouldn't shock me if it ends during, before the season starts. Like, hey, we just haven't had it happen. We'll talk about it again at the end of the season. Look, the trend is we're seeing more guys do this now. They're staying for their X amount of years with their, initial team. And that's what the teams fight for every CBA, is to see how long they can hold the rights for a player, and then now the players, they don't all want to stay there anymore. Like, the loyalty factor used to be great. Like Eck talks about the loyalty factor, but we're seeing the loyalty factor sort of get eaten away now. Like, hey, it's your first team, it's your first rookie, whatever. Like, to me, I think the loyalty factor is the same now as the way you felt about your first car. Like, hey, you loved your first car, but it's easy to move on from my first car. It was a Chevy Vega.
Yeah, well, a Ford Probe here, so I can move on from that pretty quickly. No, but the reason is because I don't think that it's reciprocal. I don't think some of these teams, you have a player that you've had for 6 or 7 years. If the player drops off, they're going to say, okay, well, we'll just buy out the last couple of years of this contract and say goodbye, in spite of the fact that we asked you to be loyal to our team and take a little bit less, and in exchange for a no trade clause or something of that nature. So now to this point, to the point of players reaching free agency, Frank Cervelli talked to Matt Duchene, who we've mentioned in terms of the Ottawa situation, who's a UFA at the end of the year. And he said Duchesne said there have been no contract talks with the Sens as of yet. He says they got some big things going on, obviously, that take precedence over that, obviously meaning Carlson and maybe Stone. He said, and Duchesne, as you've said, Russ, said he's open to re-signing, but when he in the wake of Tavares, he said it's the first time you have the ultimate power as a player and you have to do what's best for you. So I honestly, I'm not saying that this means he's leaving, but he's keeping his options open, and he'd be stupid if he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, he would be dumb to not do that, but I think we all know he would prefer to stay. But again, he's saying that because his agent's telling him, look, I don't know what the Ottawa offer is going to be. Let's see what that offer is first before, you decide that is definitely where you want to play. So I think he's playing that right.
Yeah, and if he comes out and says I want to stay in Ottawa, then he immediately gives Ottawa the leverage because he's come out and said something. Now, lost in all the talk about Nylander's RFA in Toronto and the extensions for Matthews and Marner. I've been talking about it because I think it's going to be a sort of a breaking point with the Leafs is Jake Gardiner. And Pierre LeBrun spoke with Pat Brisson, who's Gardner's agent. And I know that Kyle Dubas spoke to Brisson before July 1st because he was eligible to sign an extension at that point. He's a UFA at the end of next year. Brisson said that he spoke a few times with Dubas, but nothing was on the front burner, and both sides are willing to be patient. Well, the thing about this is, and that they can be patient, but once the Leafs sign Nylander, right, and with their desire to get Matthews and Marner, at least one of them locked up before the start of the season, which Dubas said is not likely, as more of these guys come in on their deals, the less and less wiggle room the Leafs will have to sign Gardiner. So if he wanted to stay in Toronto, or at least didn't want to test free agency or be open to test free agency, he would have probably tried to get a deal done now. I think this is going to go down to next summer, and they offer him, the hometown discount deal, and with a big five in free agency in terms of defense, Schmidt, Bouwmeester, Myers, Gardiner, and Carlson, I see no way the Leafs are able to sign Jake Gardiner to a new contract.
Okay, but suspending belief from that for a minute and just say that you're not Mike Ogello and you're just somebody else. What would you offer Jake Gardiner?
I would offer him. I mean, if I was somebody who actually liked the type of game that he played, or somebody who thought that
Cousin Eddie, what would you offer him?
Well, I don't know if Cousin Eddie likes him.
He does, or at least he likes to ride you.
He's okay. He's turning 29 on July 4th of next year. So I would at max would offer him a 5-year deal at maybe 5.75 to 6 million.
And that's not a bad deal. That is something I think they would have to consider.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Russ. I don't think he will consider it.
I don't know. I mean, I think it depends how this season goes.
Because 5.75 to 6 million in terms of percentage of cap is about the same as what Morgan Riley's getting.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think what they'll, depending on how this season goes, I think that might be the way that the Leafs sort of play it to Gardiner. Like, hey, we could pay you this and you could be a part of this when we win. Or we could pay you this, and if you don't like it, you could go try and win somewhere else.
Yeah, because I honestly think
what's going to happen.
Where I think the comparative will be for Gardiner as a free agent next year will be Shattenkirk, and Shattenkirk took less term. He took 4 years, but he almost got $7 million, and they're very similar type defensemen. I don't think that the Leafs will have the flexibility to pay him that much or even more than that based on percentage of cap, and his liabilities defensively, I think, contribute to that. So the only thing you can look at from the Toronto perspective is Hainsey's a UFA after next year. So that opens up $3 million, and you're more than likely going to have guys like Liljegren come up, and they're going to be on entry level. So it gives you more room. But you're not factoring in what you're going to be paying Matthews, what you're going to be paying Marner. Marlowe's contract is still on the books. All these things factor into what they'll be able to pay Gardner as on a new contract, and I don't think they're going to be able to fit all those pieces in the puzzle. So, I mean, we'll see.
You know what? Honestly, I think what's going to happen here, and you're going to gasp, but this is true, because when you think about the young guys that could come up next year and be on the Leafs defense, even with those guys, the defense takes a step back. There's no way around it. If they don't add anybody else, it's going to take a slight step back until they, learn how to play at the NHL level.
Well, I still think they're going to add somebody else. I mean,
right, they'll add a Band-Aid guy. They won't add a long-term guy. Let's just say they do that.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance they choose Jake Gardner over Nylander. Like, I think they say, hey, we're going to bridge Nylander, and we're going to make sure he's low enough that Gardner's contract fits in, and because again, how many defensemen are you really talking about that can make the Leafs in the next 2 years? How many?
Inside their own organization?
Inside their own organization.
Well, I would say 2. I'd say they're first-round picks. I would say Liljegren and maybe Sandin, but Sandin could be 3 years because he's only
so 2, and you're going to lose 2.
You're going to lose.
Or potentially
you're going to lose Hainsey, and you're probably going to lose. I think you're probably going to lose Gardner. That's why I think that.
But you see what I mean? This is where they could possibly make this call.
Well, what I've been theorizing here is I still think with the empty cap space that they're going to have this year, that they're going to have the ability, and they will go out and trade for somebody who has more than this year left in a contract, like a Justin Falk, like a Chris Tanev, and maybe keep Gardner for the playoff run, have that defenseman along with Gardner to boost their defense, and then that guy will stay and Gardner will leave.
I don't think so. Honestly, I think it could come down, depending on how it all shakes out, to like a bridge deal for Nylander, a long-term deal for Gardner, and then they lock up Matthews, and that's the route they go because they look at it and say, we don't know if Sandin or Liljegren can be a top 3. Well, that's the problem, and that's the problem with this equation, and we don't know that.
And I know you're gonna sort of shrink at this, but there is a lot of confidence within the Leaf organization in Travis Dermott, to the point that when I talked to Dermott in a media scrum earlier this week, Dermott talked about how he played the right side in Erie, how he played the right side with the Marlies, and the opportunities on the Leaf defense are on the right side, meaning taking over for Hainsey, or moving Zaitsev down to a second pairing or where he's at right now. But that's where Dermott might have a path to being a top 4 defenseman. It may be rushing it for that, to expect that this year.
I think it's a little bit of a rush, but I get it because I do like what he brings to the table. I always have.
Yeah.
But again, they still may look at it and say, realistically, this is the little bit of inequity we have on defense here. We may not be able to afford to lose them. That's all I'm just saying.
Right, and that's why I keep saying if they really want to be Stanley Cup
contenders, they need to make the trade for that other defenseman so they don't have to worry about Jake Gardner, but they haven't been able to do it.
Right, and that's why maybe you will see it at the deadline when teams like Carolina. Yeah, I think Carolina is positioning themselves to trade Falk at the deadline. I think Vancouver is positioning themselves to trade a defenseman like Tanev at the deadline. If they're not a competitive team, if he has another year where he's been injured off and on, they may want to just unburden themselves of a $4+ million salary for another year. We'll see.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, so the chat room's asking, Drew is asking, is Falk better
than Gardner?
I think he's slightly better.
Yes.
I think Falk had a bad year last year, and I don't know. I may have been one of the first ones to point it out, and I probably pointed it out too much until at the end of the year, a lot of people were saying, yeah, Falk was having a bad year. But I've seen him play a lot. And at the end of the day, I think Gardner's a better skater.
Yes. And Falk is not bad.
No, Falk's good, but Gardner's a better skater. I actually think Falk is a little better as a power play distributor than Gardner.
He's got a better shot, too.
A little better shot. And I think he's a little better in his own end. It's not like a huge upgrade, but I think at the end he is a little better.
Yeah, I think they're very similar defensemen, and the other plus is Gardner's a left and Falk is a right. And and with Babcock, that makes a lot of difference. They are very weak on the right side. And if you could bring in Falk and have Falk play on the top pairing with Morgan Riley and move Hainsey down to the bottom pairing, that would be a Herculean upgrade for the Leafs defense. But anyway, we'll get off the Leafs here. There was some news yesterday regarding the potential Seattle expansion team. According to numerous reports, the original plan was for the team to, if approved, to join the NHL in the 2020-2021 season. Now it appears that it's going to be the following year, 2021-22. We've talked about delays in the renovation for Key Arena. The cost,
really, I think, was overrun, like a cost overrun.
$100 million overrun.
I don't know if it really delayed it, but it was a cost overrun. Yeah.
But the other factor, and you can't ignore it, is the CBA. Now, the current CBA expires after the 2021-22 season, so that it would still have this team entering into the league during the current CBA. And remember, the current CBA, hockey-related revenue expansion fee is not included. So honestly, I think the $650 million entry fee is the war chest for the owners in terms of a potential lockout.
Yeah, it does seem that way, doesn't it? And so, this is something we didn't take into consideration yesterday because we both felt like it was probably going to happen on time. And then this comes up. I think this is a combination of that and the way the project's going, because you never know how these renovations are going to go. Like we talked about, the Coliseum yesterday. And look, if you have your own house renovated, like my kitchen got renovated at a pretty good price, but did it still end up being a little more than what was quoted? Just a little. But sometimes when you get, it's like anything else. You go bring your car into a dealership. Well, forget a dealership because they rob you blind. But go bring your car into just like a mechanic and let him give you that quote. 9 times out of 10, it's coming out higher than that quote unless you're getting an oil change. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the way it is, because it's sort of like once we're in there thing. And doctors do that too. Like, there's no real full way of knowing a lot of times. So I think that it's a combination of both. And it's interesting now that all of a sudden, not that the brakes are put on, but it's slowed down a little now.
Now, when we talked about this, the NHL, the opt-out for the NHL is September 1st of next year, September 1st of 2019. The opt-out for the PA is less than 3 weeks later, September the 19th, 2019. So that gives them almost 2 years to negotiate a new CBA while the league is still in process, while the league is still going on. So that will be.
How often does that happen? Never. Let's be realistic.
Yeah, I know, but
they always have to have the gun to the head, the back to the wall, the hey, we're not showing up for camp when it opens, kind of thing, atmosphere happening to actually get somewhere.
And more than likely
for this league, baseball, for some reason, they were able to knock out a 10-year deal without any of those histrionics. But this league has never been able to do that, at least for the last decade that we've been covering it.
And more than likely, we're going to be waiting until the summer of 2022 for it to get really serious, and then
walk away when they have the option year. You think they're going to play through that option?
Yeah, I think they have to. I think that there is no, I think they're contractually obligated to play through 21-22. Okay. So I think what I'm saying,
that one they had an option.
Well, it's the option to renegotiate. It's not the option of whether to walk out.
Well, I mean, unless the negotiations will go well. Yeah, I guess they have to stay in it to 2022 then, no matter what. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, you're right. It is just to negotiate. They may opt out to not negotiate, though. We'll see. I mean, if they do negotiate, it's a great sign. If they don't, then that's another one of those uh-oh moments. That's the way it's going to work out.
And believe me, folks, we'll be covering AHL hockey here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, one more thing. We'll talk about some of the rookie tournaments that are happening this weekend. Interesting observation here, and I know that when I say this, fans of the CHL and Canadian hockey will be cringing. The expected #1 pick next year is Jack Hughes.
Right.
If Jack Hughes is selected #1 overall, that will mark the longest span in NHL history that a Canadian was not selected first overall. That's Matthews, Hischier, Rasmus Dahlin, excuse me, and Jack Hughes. Two Americans, a Swiss, and a Swede. That's, I mean, Connor McDavid being the last one.
I love it. Diversity. I think it's great. No offense to Canada, but I just think it's fantastic that, we're getting it from different places. It's always should be the best player no matter what, right? So who cares where that player's from, really?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't care. Honestly, I've said it.
Probably still draft them.
I've said it forever. I don't care if the player is a Martian. If he's good, I want him on my team. If he's the best, who cares?
Right.
But it is
interesting.
Yes, there is that. I mean, there's American parochialism. There's Canadian parochialism.
Well, the Don Cherry factor, if you want to talk about the Canadian.
Sure.
Because that's what we're talking about here.
Yes. After we talk about the rookie tournaments, we'll take some questions in the chat to end the show. I know that, Russ, I have been a frequent attendee of the Leafs rookie tournaments, whether they be in London, Ontario. Last year, they were at the MasterCard, or they were at the Ricoh Coliseum, now renamed Coca-Cola Coliseum in Toronto, between the Canadians, Ottawa Senators, and Leafs rookies. This year it's up in Laval, Quebec, so I'm not going up this year. But there's one in Buffalo between, I think it's Boston, at least in the past it's been Boston, Buffalo, and New Jersey. I don't know what the makeup is this year. There's the Traverse City tournament with a number of teams. I mean,
eight teams, I think, in Traverse.
Yeah, these tournaments have really grown in importance. I'll just give you an example. 7 or 8 years ago, I went to the one in London. It may have been that one. It may have been the following year. One of the kids who was a free agent invitee for the Leafs was a player named Mitchell Hurd.
Yeah,
and Mitchell Hurd had this unbelievable rookie camp and didn't get signed. He wasn't eligible to be signed because he was still draft eligible. And he turned that into being drafted in the second round by Colorado the following year.
Yeah.
His career never really went far, but you can make an impression on teams out there and carve a pathway to the NHL.
Yeah, Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's a perfect example. But yeah, I look at it right now, and he played in Traverse and Columbus, yeah. But I look at it right now, and I do look. I like a lot of these games, and I've seen a ton of them. I don't know if I'm going to this year's Flyers Islanders because it's on the island and the traffic is awful. And I've seen all of these players a lot. Yeah. I may skip that one, but I've seen almost everyone the Flyers have put on, and I've been to a lot of other tournaments. Here's what I've been looking at. So I looked at a few different things. So as an example with the Rangers, Jeff Gorton came out yesterday and said in their Traverse that, hey, I get it that people want to talk about my centers playing as wingers because we have too many centers. But in this tournament, Bill Cheadle, Lias Anderson, Brett Howden are all playing as centers because that's how we want to evaluate them. And that's the important thing here. Like you might decide in the end, like, hey, for Cheadle to make the Rangers this year, he's going to have to play the wing. But you still have to evaluate his center play because that's how you drafted him and that's how you envision him. And down the road, that's where he's going to slot in. Like, look, I get it. There's Nemestikov, there's Spooner, there's too many centers, and Zibanejad. So somebody's not playing center. But in a tournament like this, there's no reason to put a guy in at wing. You could make that change later. You want to figure out who your best center is. Like, that's the thing. I mean, you want to make sure, hey, Anderson is the guy that we think should be playing center all the time. And maybe after this, they'll say, Cheadle can play both, but let's slot him in on the wing this year. And Howden, yeah, we're going to put him in Hartford, but he is a center and he's getting close. And that's, I think Gorton has made a smart move here. And it's good sometimes to sort of educate the fan base and let them know what you're thinking. I like the fact that he's letting them know what he's thinking.
Yeah, and I think it's extremely important, especially with players who have played, most centers can play the wing. I know that, for example, William Nylander, when he was drafted in 2014 at the rookie tournament, he did play up the middle. Then he went back to Sweden in the SHL and played up the middle. When he came to the Marlies, he played up the middle. And only when Babcock called him up in late 2016 They played him at center for a while, but when Matthews was around, he played the wing, and he's primarily a winger. Now they based that shift on what they learned from him at the rookie tournament and what they learned in lower leagues. And I think it's important in terms of an evaluation process to play the players at the position you think that he can play at to see if he can or cannot. And I know for, like, we talked about before the show, there was a lot of talk about Rasmus Sandin, the Leafs' first-round pick. He will be at the rookie tournament in Laval. Kyle Dubas came out at the draft, and he has options. He's one of these guys who was loaned by his SHL team. He can play in Sault Ste. Marie, but there have been indications he's not going back to the OHL. So it's good between going and playing for Rögle, where he has a year left on his SHL contract, or playing with the Marlies. Right. And Dubas said, well, based on what he does, we'll see how far along he is. And if we think he's far enough along, we'll let him play with the Marlies. But more than likely, unless he stands on his head and does a Bobby Orr imitation in the rookie tournament, he's probably going back to Rögle.
Right, and that's fine. I mean, that's what the plan is, unless the player pushes it to the point where that's, it's going to be a change. Like another team at Traverse to watch are the Blues, right? We talked about Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, and I want to take credit for this, and I am going to pat myself on the back for this, because I saw like a week after I had interviewed him at the rookie showcase, that all of a sudden there was a lot of interviews going on with Robert Thomas and him making the team and how good he looks. And if you listen to Robert Thomas, he knows that this tournament could put him on that team, and and the preseason. But he knows that. He's a smart guy. He's smart on the ice. He's big, and he can score. He knows, if I have a good tournament here, this could really make me. And he also knows that having Kyrou on the team can really help him on the power play. So if they both play on the top power play, that could be something pretty special. But this is big for Kyrou too. But I think there's some, Kyrou may not make the team this year, but I think Thomas has the great chance to, and this tournament could be a big deal for him. So, watch the Blues, because they want to win this tournament. Like, they actually, and this is part of the reason why.
Well, here's an indicator of how important a rookie tournament is, especially with a team that was very weak up the middle. Nazem Kadri was drafted in 2009, first-round pick of the Leafs. He played one game in his while he was still in junior. They called him up for one game during the season. He had a great training camp, and they said he's too young. He's 18 years old. We're not gonna rush him. They sent him back to junior. The next year, the 2010 rookie tournament, he was expected, to make the team, because he did everything so well that previous year, and he put too much pressure on himself, and he did not play well at the rookie tournament. He did not play well in preseason games, and he ended up, playing most of that season with the Toronto Marlies. That was a direct correlation to him struggling at the rookie tournament. And really, for 2 or 3 years, he struggled at the NHL level because he simply wasn't ready. And what he did at the rookie tournament reflected that.
Yeah, and so another team, the Detroit Red Wings, we're pretty sure that Zadina is going to make the big club, and we're pretty sure that Rasmussen is going to make the big club. But just for confirmation's sake, if they have a great Traverse, that will be the nod that Ken Holland needs to sort of go with this and say, all right, you know what? I know I've been cautious before, but these two guys, this is undeniable. Like, I have to put them in.
I mean, there are certain guys that no matter how they play, they're going to be in the NHL. Rasmus Dahlin and Casey Middlestat, if they have the worst rookie tournament in recorded history, they're still gonna make the Sabres.
Right. Yeah. There's no question. And they have their own 3-team tournament.
Yeah. So, I think it's Boston, New Jersey, and Buffalo.
Yeah. And so, like, everybody's got their thing going, but these games are great. Like, as an example, Traverse is $10 a day. I think I just saw it was $10 a day. So you can go in and see some great talent for that. The Flyers, the Flyers Islanders one is in their practice rink, which is in Eisenhower Park. I don't know what the cost will be. It might even be free. A lot of times those games have been free. So definitely look for that. These things they're great values. You can see some talent, future talent. You can see some guys that are ready to break out. I love that. I think this is a great time of the year for that. Again, we're heading into, Kiefer Bellows told me a week ago, I had this, video up on Facebook, but it's not the best audio. I have perfect audio for Off the Post, and he'll be on the next Off the Post, and people will be able to hear it if they're not totally making out what he's saying. But he is stoked to play in this game against the Flyers prospects because A, it's a division rival, but B, he knows he's close, and if he does well in this game, he could, he's got Lou Lamoriello watching. He could really impress him. That's a big deal.
Okay, those who have questions in the chat, start sending them now. I just have to bring up this quickly and I know I can gauge what your reaction is going to be. This thing with Lou and the high numbers.
Oh, boy.
I mean, and apparently he's taken Beauvillier and I think Hosang's numbers, which were Hosang was 66 and Beauvillier was, I think, 72.
Yes.
He's taken those numbers away from them. Honestly, I don't get it. Where is the disrespect in high numbers?
I don't know, but again, this is just his belief, and this is more about like culture change than it is like Scientology, numerology, or anything else that makes no sense, right? So that's what it is. This is more like, hey, I'm a winner. This is what I do. This is what we're gonna do. If you want to win, change your number. And of course, the young guys are going to change their number, right? It's just, but I feel bad for the young guys that have to change their number because they pick those numbers for a reason a lot of times.
Well, I feel bad for the fans who bought Beauvillier jerseys.
Yeah, I mean, Lou never has to worry about that. That's not a thought in his head. But yeah, I mean, just from a basic consumer spot, yeah, that's an issue. I'm not a fan of it. I'll be honest. I'm just not.
All right, let's take some questions if we got any in the chat.
Let's see. Yanni Gourde is from Thomas. Yanni Gourde is making $1 million this year as a UFA at the end of the season. Do the Lightning extend his pin at season's end or begin working on a new deal soon? Yanni Gourde's a little bit older. I think Yanni Gourde's going to be like odd man out here. I think Yanni Gourde will be a piece in a trade when they're trying to get to the Stanley Cup this year, and I think that's what's going to happen to Yanni Gourde.
Yeah, but that's going to be tough because a team making a trade, trading a piece to Tampa is going to want players that are cheap and retainable.
No, but he'll be an extra piece. Like he'll be, if you're trading for somebody of real good value, he'll be like one of those extra players, and at least you'll have a chance to negotiate with him.
Yeah, right. But I mean, what I'm saying is it's a rental going the other way, and you're going to automatically have to pay him, especially if he's having a good year. Like Nemestikov was having a good year with Tampa before they traded him to the Rangers, but Nemestikov was an RFA, so at least you could retain him. At least you could qualify him or protect yourself from him just leaving if he doesn't. I mean, he could turn around and go back to Tampa if he wanted to. So. Sure. So I admit his value, but well, the only thing with him is it depends. His status with Tampa depends on what other moves they make. If they have to trade guys like Tyler Johnson in deals to get Carlson, if they make a Carlson deal and trade 2 or 3 players, then they might have the room to spend more money on Yanni Gourde and get him signed to a team-friendly deal like they've gotten Killorn signed and other guys signed. So I think his status is up in the air, and it's based on what he does on his performance. If they can get him locked up for a little less, like they've gotten most of their players locked up for a little less, then I think he probably stays.
Okay. I mean, that's interesting, and that could happen. So then somebody is asking – who is it? Oh, Matt's asking, what's the realistic expectation for Philip Grubauer in the first year as a starter in Colorado? I saw that. I looked up Varlamov. He played 47 games last year, had 24 wins. I think if they got something similar out of that, 50 starts, 25 wins, I think they would be thrilled. Do I think he's capable? Yeah, I do. But it is still a big jump, and you never know about these 1A guys when they try and become a 1.
I mean, do you really think while they still have Varlamov under contract that they're gonna make Grubauer the number 1?
I think there's a very good chance they will. Yeah.
I mean, I think they're gonna go 1A, 1B, rotate or do whatever.
Why do I care? I mean, Varlamov's a UFA after this year anyhow, right?
Well, if you want to trade him,
but you still play, Mike. You still got to play 35 games. This is my guy. I've signed him to a deal. He just won a Stanley Cup, even though he's a backup. I got to see what he is while I still got the luxury of having Varlamov there, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's just me. Well, me and Matt. You don't. Pucking Gaming is asking, when's Nylander going to be signed? What's the holdup, Mike?
Okay, I'll put on my hat like Karnak, and that'll cover up my bald head. I will say he gets signed. Training camp opens on Thursday. I will say he gets signed on Wednesday. I think they're going to push it. I think they're going to push it right to the very edge. I think it's still. I think it's basically Nylander wants a long-term deal, and the Leafs are saying to him, if you want a long-term deal, then you're going to have to take a little bit less, like Tavares did. Like we're going to expect Matthews and Marner to, and that means I would say 6.25 to 6.5 a year on a 6-year deal. And if there's pushback on that and they can't come to an agreement, then I still think the possibility, what you were saying earlier and what I've been saying before is a 2-year bridge deal and just say push it down the road.
Okay, well, I can see that. All right, so Northern 96 Production asking, he says, Ottawa has 2 to 3 spots up for grabs. Which of their young guys do you think will win the job out of guys like, Logan Brown, Colin White, Brady Tkachuk, Alex Fermenton, Drake Batherson, Chalapik? I don't think Chalapik's going to make it, so I will take him out. Colin White will make it. If he's healthy, he's going to make it.
I see, honestly, and this is not based on ability. I think it's based on the fact that, I think White will definitely make it. I think Brown can make it.
I don't think Brown will make it, though. I don't.
Yeah, maybe they'll let him play in Belleville. Yep. And get a little seasoning. But I keep going with Tkachuk. I keep saying to myself, it's either Ottawa or London. He's not going to the AHL.
Right.
And I don't know which is which.
He'll be there for 9 games, and then they'll decide. Like that's
you think they'll give him that, or yeah?
I do.
Okay. Shabbat will be.
Yeah, he's not even putting Shabbat. Like he knows Shabbat's made the team. Yeah. Fermenton, I don't think will make it. I think he'll be in Belleville. I think Batherson will push it to the limit. Batherson looked really good at the rookie showcase. I loved what he did last year at the World Juniors. I think he's really close. So I think Batherson will push the envelope. I think in the end he won't make it, but I think he'll push the envelope too.
Remember, Fermenton, I think he played 9. So if he makes the team, he immediately burns.
He won.
He only played 1? Okay. So he'd have 9 games before he burns the first year of entry level. And based on that organization wanting to keep players as cheap as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah.
AHL.
Yeah, I think he's going AHL too. Will the Blackhawks have, this is from Drew, bounce back season to make the playoffs? No. Mike?
No.
Okay.
I think Taves will bounce back. I think Kane will be Kane. I just think they're so weak in other places that Corey Crawford would have to play. It's like it's the Stanley Cup Finals for 60 games to make the playoffs, and I just don't think it's going to happen. Yeah,
Vepsis is asking us, like, based on Cap Friendly's list of PTOs, who's the best players. Like, that's a whole half of a show. We'll have to do that another day.
Yeah, we can do that next week because we know that in the 3 or 4 days leading up to training camp there'll be a lot more. Letestu and Upshaw and now Mark Fane with Boston. It all depends on situations with those particular teams. I personally think that Toronto will invite somebody on a PTO. I just don't know if it's going to be a center or a defenseman.
Cousin Eddie wants to know if Antoine Vermette's been signed yet. Like, I don't know why he wants to know, but
no, because I think because I've mentioned Antoine Vermette as a possible PTO. You think about it this way. Right now, you're 3 center candidates for the 4th line, and these guys are not going to get a ton of ice time for Toronto. The 3 center candidates are Freddie Gauthier, Josh Juris, and Par Lindholm.
Yeah.
That doesn't leave you a lot of wiggle room if Freddie Gauthier continues to not be able to take over as the 4th line center.
Just because Eddie's asking 1,000 friggin' questions, just going to mention that because he's asking, has Rick Nash been signed? No, it's up to Rick Nash when he wants to sort of talk to teams now.
And I thought it was laughable that somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody says, well, somebody should invite Rick Nash on a PTO. Rick Nash is not taking a PTO. If Rick Nash is signing somewhere, he's getting a 1-year contract, and he's getting it for a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a PTO.
Thomas is asking if Calfoot makes the Lightning, where does that put Dan Girardi in the last year of his deal? Listen, Dan Girardi is like that Jeep that you've had for a long time, and they're riding it every last mile. So you don't have to worry about playing time for Dan Girardi. He's not,
but the suspension is broken.
Yeah, the suspension's a little creaky, but I mean, it's just, they're riding that one out, man. All right, that's it.
Okay, good show. All right, we will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Enjoy the rookie tournaments throughout the league. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.